On now, right?
Yeah.
So, before we get to the senior ranks and beat people from us, I have a very, very important topic to discuss. It might be a popular one, very popular when I'm having conversations with people, but not very popular, I think, in a very large scale. Who has heard the phrase, "There are no victims, only volunteers"? Right, so chances are you heard it either on my podcast, talking to my good friend Tom Kyer. You heard me talking about it in passing conversations. Did everybody hear about what happened to Orlando? Right, about 50 people dead, over 50 injured. So no, we're not going to get into religions. We're not going to get into cultures. I'll save that for when I'm not being recorded. But we are going to talk about mindset. So, about 3 months ago, there was a member of the local community down there, certain religious group, had a speaker in that talked about how homosexuals needed to be murdered. Said that's the only way. The speaker said that it is compassionate to do that to these people for their transgressions in front of their God. They needed to be rid of, and that's the phrase he used. You've got to get rid of them. It's the only compassionate thing to do. A couple months later, a member of that community murders 50 people, injures 50 more. They'll blame guns, they'll blame mental health, they'll blame a lot of things. I know if I'm a member of the affected community down in Orlando, and I hear that, it should serve as some sort of information to allow me, in the very least, to adjust my awareness as I navigate my day-to-day. So the whole concept of there being no victims, only volunteers, sounds, they'll say, like victim blaming. Right? Guy gets attacked. He's not a victim, he volunteered to get attacked. A girl gets attacked. She's not a victim, she volunteered to get attacked. You start pissing people off very quickly when you start running through the applications of this concept. But at the heart of it, what this concept is aiming to do is maintain your power in your life. At the heart of this concept, we are trying to remind you, obligate you, force you to take responsibility for the control and power you have over your own life. Now, the person who went and attacked those people, does he share in responsibility for? Of course he does. Of course he does. By saying those 50 people who were murdered volunteered for that murder does not absolve the person who enacted it. But what it does is acknowledge that everybody, including those 50 that tragically were murdered, every single one of them had control over circumstances to change the outcome of their lives. I do not mean by any means to lessen the significance of the tragedy, to lessen the significance of the loss that all of their friends and loved ones are currently going through because of the tragedy. But understand, it is not the warrior's luxury to sit back and say, woe is me. To sit back and say, somebody should have helped me. Because chances are, if we pause the scene and rewind the timeline, it does not take much to see certain forks in the road where they went one way instead of another. They made this decision instead of that decision. The only way to make certain that we follow the pursuit of control and power is to make sure we maintain accountability for our circumstances. There are two groups who I would say this does not apply to. Children and retards. I'm sure there's a more politically correct term, but the power of language is I communicate a word and everybody understands what I'm talking about. Works for me. So the reason they're absolved of this responsibility is because they are not in control. They don't make choices. People make choices before them. A child is molested, that child is a victim. And it's unfortunate that the adults in that child's life volunteered that child to be attacked. But there needs to be accountability, because the accountability is what preserves our power. As soon as somebody says to you, there's no way you could have won, there's no way you could have succeeded, there's no way you could have improved your life, what they've done is reduce you to a child. There's no way you could have done anything better. Why? Because you weren't powerful enough. That's what they're telling you. Now, when I say those 50 people that died volunteered, it's not a value judgment. It's not a condemnation of their lifestyle, of their identity, not at all. I could care less what they do. What it is a very indifferent assessment of how people need to make sure that they understand we live in a world that does not cater to you. When somebody runs over a child in the street, first thing we do is look at the parents. Where are the parents? Right? Where are the parents? When somebody runs over an adult, we look at the driver, right? Why'd the driver do this? We don't want to blame the adult. We know it would be ridiculous to hold that adult's parents responsible, so we look to blame somebody that makes us comfortable, that doesn't blame the victim. Everybody shares responsibility in any interaction in which they have control, input. Now, if I'm talking about those 50 people that were killed in an alternate lifestyle club, gay club, what am I going to tell them? Am I going to tell them not to go there? Maybe. Am I going to tell them to carry a firearm with them? Maybe. Am I going to tell them to make sure that they all maintain some semblance of awareness as a collective for outsiders and potential threats? Maybe. There's a lot of different ways that we can sort of reverse engineer. And I'm not making a campaign. I'm not arguing for one strategy over another. What I'm arguing for is the accountability. What I'm arguing for is telling them that they had power that they gave up. And when we sit here and say that they shared in no responsibility in the event happening, we remove the accountability of that affected group from having this happen again. You'll find somebody who's mugged often starts taking self-defense classes, often starts taking shooting classes. You'll find women who are attacked either violently or sexually or a combination of the both. They look to learn martial arts. Right? They look to empower themselves in one way. Why? Because the reaction of strong people to adversity is to become stronger. There are three ways we deal with a threat biologically: fight, flight, or freeze. What we're doing now is we're raising a society that's telling them it's okay to freeze. Because when you freeze, you assume the most passive, submissive posture imaginable. There is no moral judgment to be had in those people who are shot. But there is certainly a tactical accountability that I will criticize them for. And it's one of my jobs, one of my plights, one of my missions, to never ever allow people to remove their power without me acknowledging that process. None of you are victims. Some of these kids are, because they don't make decisions yet. But none of you are victims. If it happens to you, it happens to you. What happens when something happens to a person and everybody, including themselves, manages to take the power away from them? What do you get? You get somebody who adopts the identity of that event. Right? You have the 40-year-old man who was bullied in the 3rd grade, who's in therapy, talking about the 8-year-old that punched him in the belly. Right? Less humorously, you have the woman who was sexually attacked, who 20 years later needs to still deal with that event. When you take the power away from an individual, you allow them to make an event become their identity. And nothing should have the ability to do that. And that only happens when you choose to give that power away. Thank you guys for listening.